Welcome to the Building Blocks podcast, where we discuss the career paths of leaders in the energy, utility, and construction fields to better understand the habits, routines, and mindset that has built these successful men and women. I'm your host, Brad Coleman. It took me 20 years to understand my strengths. My goal is to identify the common traits of leaders in our industry to provide you with the tools you need to be successful in a fraction of that time. Thank you for listening. For more information on these guests and others, please come find me on LinkedIn. Thank you for listening. For more information on these guests and others, please come find me on LinkedIn. Welcome to the Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Brad. This is where we break down the careers of professionals, leaders in the construction and utility space. We like to look back at those that have built their careers in utilities and talk to them a little bit about what has made them who they are today, the different things that have happened in their careers, some for better, some for worse, some mistakes that are made. And today we are joined by MG Govia. He is with Okie 811, the Oklahoma used to be called Dig Test, Dig Prevention. In Texas, it was called Dig Test. He's very active on LinkedIn, is a speaker, and anything public outreach / awareness of excavation safety in that realm within the 3 or 4 state circumference of Oklahoma. There's a good chance that you hear MG talking about it quite a bit, including his own podcast, which I'm sure that we'll get into talking about. But MG, fill in a little bit of details maybe that I may have missed and talk a little bit about your background with Okie 811 and where you are in your career right now.
Yeah, Brad, you did a great job, actually, kind of giving the breakdown of who I am. I've been with Okie 811. I'm in my 12th year. So I started with Okie 811 as a contact center representative. So I was taking phone calls and helping excavators put in their locate requests to get lines marked. And from there, I moved into GIS, which us in the industry knows that's nerd for putting in maps. I enjoyed all the knowledge I gained, but I realized pretty quickly that that was uh, an office desk job that would get old pretty quick for me and my personality. So although I learned a lot, I realized that that just isn't the perfect fit for me. And the company's aware and helped me out. And I went from there to member services, where we helped take care of all the members within our company. And a member is a facility operator or owner who receives those locate requests. So we're database management for that and some education opportunities there. And then just through circumstance, there was an opportunity where our damage prevention team was retiring out, and we had a chance to revamp what that looks like. And we took our damage prevention team and turned it into an education and outreach department. And so streamlined some of our processes, went a lot more online, really loving the outreach through podcasts and our YouTube channel and things like that as well. It's funny, if you would have asked me, 15 years ago, what would be your career, I would not even come close to talking about Okie 811. This is a statement that I've made quite often. I don't own a shovel. I'm not known for manual labor at all. I'm more of an Excel and PowerPoint guy, but I had a good sales background, always good with customer service. And when I came at Okie 811, I really didn't know where that career path would go, but someone very special to me says that there's people who trust in their wings, and then there's those who look for where they're going to land. And I was a land person. I was always worried about where I'm going to be, who's paying me, what job am I going to do, all that stuff. And the person who's close to me reminded me, like, oftentimes when we're building our careers or trying to figure out what's next, have faith and trust in what got us to where we are now. My talent speaks for themselves, skill set, experiences, and trust in that instead of worrying about where you land. And been great advice, and I've ran with that ever since.
So with each of these different progressions within the organization, I mean, how intentional were some of those moves? I mean, you kind of identified some of the transition points in terms of the features of where you wanted to go with your career, but what was that like? I'm sure that was it a growth mindset of the next thing, or people tapping you on the shoulder? Were you actively looking? How does that sort of thing come about inside of an organization?
Yeah, great question. So I took the job at Okie 811 because I was laid off from a previous employer, right? And so I had that unemployment, I had that severance pay, all that stuff, and I was just head on a swivel trying to find something that would be a good fit for me. I didn't expect OK1 to be more than a year or two while I found something better. I mean, just truth being said. And when I came in, though, I saw the culture of the company. I saw how much safety is a focus and seeing what that we are doing a really good thing for the community throughout the state, right? With damage prevention and excavation safety. And so I got into a groove. I started enjoying the work because I realized just how important it was. And there was an opportunity in GIS, and really, I just jumped at it just to get off the telephones, right? Putting in, 80 phone calls a day, talking to excavators. Our agents are outstanding. It just isn't my wheelhouse. And so I asked for that opportunity with GIS. I started going to school. They said yes to give me an opportunity for it. And from then on is when this, oh, wait, my organization cares about me. They're going to give me opportunities if I'm capable. And so it's just a matter of showing my ability and my skill set for each opportunity. I humbly want to brag. I've had the opportunity to be Employee of the Year twice. We've done some really cool innovation when it comes to how we're using our online messaging, how we're getting more and more people in front of the A11 training than ever before. So what happened is as I was giving opportunities, I was challenging what we've always done because I'm so new, right? So I'm not a lifer, right? I'm in my 40s now. I've only been with Oki for a little bit over 10 years. So pre 35, I had no clue about utilities or excavation damage or anything like that. And for me to come into this, I can challenge what that box is, right? Like, why do we educate this way? Why is this the best way to do things? And we look at better opportunities from it. So it's kind of both. One was, oh man, there's something can probably make me happier within the organization. I never wanted to leave the organization. I kind of learned where my stuff fit and got an opportunity because our organization really does invest in our employees and gives them opportunities if they can see where they fit best.
Oh, yeah, and I can tell that just based on the way you describe it. I mean, you've taken a lot of initiative, it sounds like, to be able to start new programs, implement new programs, but you've been given a lot of flexibility to be able to test some things out too.
Yeah, we're not afraid to fail. That's something that I'm really proud of my leadership. We've had ideas that just did not come together the way that we thought it was going to, but you live and learn and you come out better with the next project or the next idea. So that's something that we're really proud of. It's okay to fail. It's not okay not to learn from it.
Yeah. And how have the different positions that you've had in the organization bring different perspective to what you do now?
I think that's one of the main reasons that I am so relatable to both audiences, right? So being OK1, we're the one call center, which means we're the communication hub of the excavators who are wanting to dig and make money and do their job. And we're the communication hub to our member companies, those who have underground assets that want to make sure nothing gets damaged, right? And being able to understand where the excavator is coming from, because I had over 2 years of direct conversations with them, and then understanding what the members are trying to do because I've dealt with their mapping, I dealt with their communication as far as who's receiving locates, and then of course now being out in the field, I've been in conversations where member company is here and excavator is here, and we're just trying to get on the same page. And so being able to have those different perspectives through my growth here helps those conversations. Easy way to knock down walls. I was like, hey, I know this excavator is just trying to make money. He's frustrated because the locate was late. Can we figure this out? And then we go back to the member companies and go, hey, can we look at your processes? Can we see what we can do to improve this so that we're not frustrating the excavator community? Because the biggest thing is making sure that people have faith in A11. If it's breaking down all the time and the communication isn't happening and there's late locates and stuff like that, excavators may decide to risk and dig without tickets and stuff like that. So we just want to be as visible as possible and show that, hey, even when it's not perfect, we're striving for perfect. We're striving for on-time locates. We're striving for good communication and making sure the excavators. So that's kind of how I got here with all those transitions and different departments. I mean, the only thing that I really didn't have that much involvement in is in our IT, and trust me, nobody wants that. But I think I have a good grasp of the whole A11 process and be able to talk to anybody who uses it, from member company to excavator and general public.
And it's kind of ironic. I think you referenced this on your podcast that we still call it the one call system because you all, I think within the last year, have migrated everything over online, now online requests and stuff. I think you
Mhm.
mentioned, I think I heard you say that. But we'll talk about your podcast then. How is your podcast part of your outreach? Is it interview platform, education style, mix of both? Digging deep, right? Isn't that what it's referred to? Isn't that what you call it?
Our OK811's podcast is called Digging Deep. So as you're looking around on all your platforms, whether it's Spotify or Apple, whatever, if you type in Digging Deep OK811, you'll find it. But what we have done is it started off as a monthly interview, right? I would find somebody to talk to once a month within the industry, someone who maybe have facilities, maybe someone who's a safety trainer. We've had some mental therapists who helped last year around this time, around mental health, especially in male-dominated industries. So it was a lot of different topics along that line. Because excavation safety and digging and damage prevention is kind of a niche topic or so limiting, what we've ran into is how hard it is to find people to come and talk to me on a monthly basis. So just recently, as in last week, we launched a segment called Safety Scoops. So within Digging Deep, we'll launch a safety scoop, which is just a 10-minute informative podcast. The last one was over trenching safety. Pulled a clip from a local news station that had an article about a trench collapse, and we talked about this realistic danger that's out there for our excavators, and wanting to make sure they understand the risk that they're taking. And 10 minutes in, we're done. You got a refresher, hopefully, and if not a refresher, some new information to hopefully keep you safe. And so we'll be doing those safety scoops every 2 weeks, in addition to the interviews as we kick those back up.
Well, I like how you're using a platform for educational purposes and building in public that sometimes I think we don't think about necessarily. I mean, you can
Yeah.
have safety training videos, you can have public awareness campaigns, but I don't know that they're always as mainstream and done in public as what you're doing, especially it can be so vastly distributed on multiple platforms. That's exactly why I record video as well, so that, we can do short clips and the podcast and YouTube. I don't know that anybody will ever see it, but it's there, for the sake of posterity in case anybody wants to see it later or anything like that. I think it's great the way that you're building it in the style and having the conversations that we need to be talking more about.
Definitely. I kid a little bit about my YouTube channel. We have that as well, so that just like your process, we do the video as well as the audio only podcast. And my mom might be the only one who's watching the YouTube channel, and that's okay. But at least it's just one more. There's that safety scoop that we released was 2 weeks ago, and we've already had over 20 downloads on the audio only. And then on the video side, which we don't even have video for that one, we're not doing true video on the safety scoops. We just throw the audio up on YouTube as well with just a static frame. And that one's even been listened to like 10 times just on YouTube. So even if something happens, Brad, and anybody else who's doing a podcast, if you do an audio only podcast, throw up a static frame and throw it on YouTube as well, 'cause the visibility is still there.
That's good. I appreciate the advice as I'm trying to figure it all out and make my way as well. In your career, just kind of the way that you've looked at your career, you mentioned that you're more of a land person. You've always been looking more at where you're going to land and being more intentional. What part of, at what point did you feel like you could kind of take off the, not say the protection or the binders, but that allowed you to, it feels like you just relax into who you are and learning about your own personal growth and going with the flow? What changed?
Oh, so spot on. So spot on. 3 years ago, things changed for me. So this is something I've shared. Everything was kind of like, to be honest, transparency, very self-centered and seeking that promotion, that praise, that money, that whatever. And in case anybody doesn't know, Homo or OK 811 is a nonprofit. So there's limitation on that greed of an employee, right? So even though I always strive to do more and more, I was always worried, like, I'm gonna run out. I'm gonna run out of opportunity. And 3 years ago is when responsibilities changed for me. I kinda realized that there's not much higher than me right now, opportunity, hierarchy of the company and stuff. And so what I did is I was like, "Well, I'm gonna do the best I can with what's in front of me and just enjoy my job and just embrace the fact that I have gotten here." Like, I'm not at the top of the mountain, but I'm pretty high up here, right? And I know that, and I'm going to enjoy where I am and focus on how can I do this better and make it better for whoever's after me. So that is kind of where my mindset changed, and it's a whole lot easier to get in front of people from a place where I want to relate, I want to be effective, I want to be their champion in damage prevention or safety culture or excavation safety, of course. And when I took that different mindset where it's not about me, it's about the people that I'm in front of, things changed. And I've had opportunities to speak at national conferences in the last 3 years, in addition to our podcast and stuff like that. So it's all just this mindset. Like it's not about me anymore. It's about who's hearing these messages and trainings. And so about 3 years ago was that big, big shift.
It's those 40s, man.
Yeah.
There's something about it was a similar time frame for me. I mean, I feel like I don't know if this happens to multiple people or if it's something that I've experienced where a lot of the reason why I'm doing this, it's like, let's start having the conversations about
Mhm.
just young people coming up. What do they need to know? What would we have done different? And as much as anything, it's about the mistakes that we made or the things that happened to us. To say mistakes or missteps makes it sound like it's something that we did to cause it. Sometimes things
Right.
just happen. But even though they aren't bad and they all turn out good, it still builds a little piece of our character in terms of who we are today. And that's where a lot of the building blocks theme comes from, is
Oh,
it
I
still
love it.
makes up who we are. And everybody always says, and there's no doubt about it, we learn as much, if not more, from our mistakes than we do from our successes. And I love that mindset shift that you went through because it changed into more of a servant
Mm.
mindset and mentality where everything is so much more exterior focused.
Yeah, it was a big change. And another thing that I would like to add to that is I don't get commission off this, but it's a book that I highly, highly recommend to everybody who's trying to kind of figure out like you said, it's not mistakes necessarily. It's always just something that happened and how to embrace that this is just the way things are. What do I do now? And the book is called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. If you haven't already read it, please do. A practical application of stoicism, and it just kind of helps people relate to what is in my control, what isn't in my control. I often say it's similar to the serenity prayer on steroids, right? There's a lot of things that just aren't in my control, and I can fret and complain and all that about it, or I can go, well, this obstacle that's in front of me will make me a better person once I'm through it, and realizing to embrace these obstacles and challenges as learning and growth. Adam Grant is a great professor who is all over LinkedIn. Shares that a person without growth mindset says something like along the lines of, "I don't know how to do that, and I will never be able to accomplish that." While somebody with a growth mindset will say, "I don't know how to do that yet, but I will figure it out." And having trust in your capability and your ability to figure these things out is what you need. So between the obstacles of the way and just understanding the growth mindset, those two things were just huge for me in the last 3 to 4 years.
Been a big fan of studying stoicism for a couple of years, and I'm sure that it's probably Ryan Holiday and his
Yeah.
his work that I mean, he's the one that kind of brought it mainstream. And I think he has 5 or 6 books out now, and he's working on another series, Courage is Calling. I've got several of them. I'll look at Ego is the enemy.
Yeah.
Stillness is the key. Obstacle is the way. Courage is calling. I mean, I've been cleaning out my books, and his series is definitely ones that I'm holding on to for long term.
Perfect.
But,
Yeah.
but yeah, exactly what you're saying. There's just a handful of principles that if we realize that there's only certain things that are in our control and not, and if you only focus on the things that are in your control, but the things that have happened to us are still part of us. It's really a great mindset shift to be able to refocus anxieties. I
Mhm.
guess I say, I'm always a very future oriented person, kind of what you're saying, the next
Right.
thing, worried about what's my retirement going to look like? When do I need to be doing this? But am I spending, well, when we're so focused on the future, we don't live in the present.
Right.
And
Yeah. Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say that's where we can get lost by letting the present bypass us whenever we're too worried about what could or couldn't happen in the future, where it's things that were out of our control anyway.
Exactly. That was huge for me to get to that growth mindset because what I struggled with originally, like I said, was I was very worried about me. I was so worried about me that I wasn't enjoying the present, like what we were saying 3 years ago. All of a sudden, I'm like, okay, well, the future isn't. I don't see a clear path for what's next. About 3 years ago, before 3 years ago, there was always something I can look forward to, even within the organization. There's always something next, something next. Around 3 years ago, I was like, if there's next, it's way out there. It's like it's not worth losing today on. And and that's where that mindset came into play. It's embrace and enjoy what you have while being mindful of the future. Don't
Yeah.
live there.
Well, and I think the next step of that that's kind of helped me continue to where I'm going to go from there mentally is the Jocko Willink principle of discipline equals freedom. And mostly it's, I know where I want to go, but I can't affect that directly. That's more of the outcome. That's the
Mhm.
product. But I know that what can I do right now today to set myself up for the future? If I develop good habits and develop good discipline, that I know that if I work the plan, I know that I will eventually end up where I want to be, even though sometimes you have to be flexible with the execution of that.
Yeah. I heard this analogy, and I think it's solid. There was a mother and her child on a train, and it was a 5-hour train ride to their destination. And the child is impatient. The child's being a normal child was like, I wish we were there already. I want to get there. And mother's like, we will get there. We're on the track. Literally. Do not wish time away. Enjoy now. And I just I know it's a simple analogy. There's nothing really fancy about it, but the train is on the track. Like there's no other place it can go. And yet we still want to wish time away and fast forward so much when we can be enjoying the moment and enjoying the relationships around us, enjoy the ride, if you will. And so I really like that analogy.
And still, very often, I still need those checkpoints just
Mm.
for myself, just to kind of check in to make sure that I'm still doing the things that I need to do for that peace of mind. I think that helps also to help me to live in the present.
I just want to throw this out there because I think it ties in, maybe not directly, but something that I present over and I speak about is overcoming imposter syndrome. I mentioned that I don't own a shovel. Like I didn't plan on being in the utility damage prevention industry ever. And so 3 years ago is when I got the confidence and all this other stuff. But before that, even in the 3 years that I was presenting and getting around and talking about excavation safety, I felt like an imposter up there. Like if you've held a shovel more than 10 times, you've held a shovel more than me, right? So I've just had this problem of trying to overcome that. And luckily, if you research a little bit over imposter syndrome, syndrome isn't technically the right word for it. Syndrome is a permanent case. Someone who has Down syndrome, for example, that's something that it's not something you can overcome. So what imposter syndrome is, it's a situation, it's a circumstance that you feel that you're not in the right place or you're not in where you need to be with your abilities. And when I started researching more and more about imposter syndrome, I realized that I can overcome it by just more experience, leaning into the fact that I don't know everything, being able to relate to that guy in overalls who just got off a tractor who wants to talk to me and go, hey, I don't understand the day in and day out struggles that you have as an excavator, but I do know that I care about you and I want you to be safe and I want you to come back to work tomorrow. And this is the information I can share with you. Feel free to share with me so I can learn your side of things better. And then all of a sudden things just hey, imposter syndrome got less and less. Do embrace what you don't know and challenge those around you that do know more. And then your confidence will come up and you don't feel like a fraud anymore. And that was also really, really huge part of that transition. So it's just one of the many facets that occurred around 3 years ago.
And the imposter syndrome is big, and especially for me, putting yourself out of your comfort zone and stuff is really difficult. I heard somebody recently say imposter syndrome is basically your survival instinct saying, we've never been here before. This is new. This is scary. But your then internal response to that should be, well, good, because that means I'm growing.
Right.
You're not supposed to know what it means to be here right now because you haven't been here right. And
Right.
so the job is to figure it out or at least suppress voice until we can figure it.
Yeah. May I throw another book at you, Brad? You
Absolutely.
you probably have this one too. It sounds like because we're very similar. But there's a book called "The Mountain Is You," and I just forgot the author's name. She is a psychiatrist or a therapist, but definitely in mental health, and it's about self sabotage. And so, for instance, somebody who's in an abusive relationship, from the outside looking in, we're all like, "Man, just get out of that! Like that's terrible situation for you to be in." But that person who's going through it wakes up every day. They have a roof over their head. Their body says, well, yeah, this isn't great, but we're surviving. And if we leave this, will we have a roof over our head? Will we be fed every day? And so even though it's not the best situation, they don't know, the fear of what is unknown is greater than the safety of what is known, even if it is an abusive relationship, stuff like that. And so that book, the Mountain Is You, illustrates that over and over in different ways and say, hey, this is why you self-sabotage when this new project is handed down to you, and then you freak out and all of a sudden the project failed. Would the project have failed if you'd done it 10 times before? Or is it failing because you're just so intimidated by something new and something outside of your comfort level? So it's a really good book as well. Brad, I like your podcast. I like being able to talk about a little bit more of the deeper things that go into day to day being a professional, not the, well, this is what I did. This is the job that I do. I like being able to kind of see into our mindsets and how we do our job.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, I looked it up real quick. I was actually not familiar with that book, so I will definitely look it up. The Mountain Is You: Transforming Self-Sabotage into Self-Mastery. The
Yeah.
author is Brianna Wiest. Okay, I first read it as West. It's Wiest.
Yeah. Yeah. Gonna,
Okay,
yeah.
I assume that's pronounced Wiest, but that's why I spell it, just in case I butcher it for somebody that might be wanting to look it up. What was throughout these different transitions? Did you have that imposter syndrome as you're moving through the organization? Because I mean, for you to go from customer service to GIS, it's a very learnable skill, but it's also a very technical skill
Mhm.
that, I mean, you most likely, I actually did the same thing.
Oh, okay.
I started for an electric and gas co-op in Denton and was doing AutoCAD drafting. They merged us with the GIS department to where now we're
Mhm.
designing in Esri. And so that I kind of learned it on the fly, and
Yeah.
I kind of understood the theory of how SQL and databases work, so I could understand data storage from that perspective. And this was the early 2000s, so everything is different now. But I enjoyed that aspect of it. But I always say too, I'm never going to be a database programmer. I'm never going to deep dive on it, but I can talk about it. And I feel like that's
Right.
kind of how that creates a lot of imposter syndrome, honestly.
Right.
I often say I know a little bit about a lot of subjects, but if
Hmm.
I talk to somebody that's an expert, they're going to think I'm a complete fraud because I don't try to fake it. But at the same
Yeah.
time, I'm not the expert that they are. And it makes
Yeah.
me very intimidated. And then you
Ah,
step into all those new roles.
yeah. Great lead in. So with GIS, luckily for me, I am a nerd. I do enjoy being on the computer. I do enjoy, and I know this is going to sound unique for us. Our GIS is pretty, there's different layers and different responsibilities that we have with our GIS mapping. My role was just maintaining our base layer, which is roads and addresses, all that stuff, right? And so it was pretty black and white because it was an entry level position at best, right? Here's a list of all these things that need to be changed, do it, check it off, you know how, edit these features and move on, right? So that it wasn't so overwhelming because A, it was entry level. I trusted in my ability to learn things pretty quick, and I wasn't in front of anybody. I wasn't up there in front of 100 people going, look at my map. Like nobody knows MG did that versus anybody else did that. It just was done. So I didn't have to worry about that aspect of it. I proved that I could do it just by the work, right? Just checking boxes. The imposter syndrome really kicked in when I got in front of the audiences to talk about excavation safety. Last year, for example, was the first time I ever got on an excavator, like an excavator. Just jumped on there, running the controls. I was picking up tires and putting them on traffic cones, and it was a race. Like, how fast can you put 5 tires on this traffic cone? Well, it took me approximately 7.5 minutes. That is not a good time. The winner of that took less than a minute, just for reference, right? Right. So I'm just up there just failing all over left and right, and I get off, but to me, that's not imposter syndrome. I never claimed to know how to run an excavator. I got out there just, here's some levers, let's go, right? And so that's kind of how I was with GIS. I never claimed I knew everything about GIS. I was willing to learn it. And then you go and present on excavation safety, and you can't come from a place of ignorance when you're trying to talk to everybody. You go, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. I just thought I'd be up here talking. That's not going to work with safety training. You have to get respect immediately. So for those first couple years, although my public speaking and confidence was there on that aspect of it, I would walk away from every presentation going, man, if they only knew that I just play video games when I get home, I don't do yard work. Like that stuff was always like, man, they're going to find me out eventually. And luckily no one found me out before I found myself out. And then now we're in a good spot where people trust where I'm coming from and able to share from a genuine perspective of their safety.
Well, what you've got that you adopted is that beginner's mindset. And I think that's very important for a couple of reasons. For one thing, when you step into a situation that you're uncomfortable with, it comes with a certain humility of, I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm not trying to step in here and act like I know everything. I'm here to learn what you do. I mean, it's almost a subservient kind of a attitude when you walk in. And I think that helps. It makes you more accepted by the group, whether that's GIS, whether that's with the excavators, the first time that you jumped on a backhoe or an excavator, and so it's not just even about the learning, because that's the other thing is the second part of that is you become a sponge in terms of the way you absorb information, everything that you can. And the better of a feedback loop there is for somebody to be able to answer your questions, it's only going to compound your growth.
Exactly. I remind every excavator that I'm in front of. Last year, so we kind of track our numbers, right? So attendance wise, I was in front of over 6,000 excavators last year. So people who do this for a living, and I tell them at the end of every presentation, shoot me an email, tell me anything I got wrong. First of all, tell me anything I got wrong. Then tell me how I could do it better. And then 3, tell me what you would have done differently. And if I get those 3 answers from anybody who listens to me, I'm learning like every single time. Out of that 6,000, I probably got less than 20 emails. But the point is, it's an opportunity that I get. Tell me what I got wrong. Tell me how I could have done it differently, or how I could have done better. And then you tell me what you would have done differently with that training piece. And I think those 3 questions have helped me gain the confidence I need. And it also, like you said, shows that some humility to go, hey, I'm not claiming to know everything. I'm claiming to know what I need to tell you. And if I miss something, you're my critic, and it's where I'm going to learn for the next time I'm presenting.
Yeah. And I think that brings you a lot of credibility too, in making people more willing to listen to you. Do you have visual? Like, could you throw up if you really wanted feedback, could you throw up a QR code for them to answer those questions for you? Because I bet you there's a lot that would love to help out, but then they forget the email address or just get busy with life, because of the conference and then moving on.
QR codes is the way to go. I have Microsoft Forms. There are a link to them. I also use a program called Slido, Slido, which is a really cool interactive survey form that you can integrate with your PowerPoints. And so I can get real live feedback as well. I don't usually use that one to tell me how bad I am. That's kind of, I don't want 100 people to see Bob telling me that I said something wrong. I don't need that necessarily. But Bob can email me, or Bob can send me a form later. I'm good with that. But the Slido app is really, really great for who's in the room, what do you know, quick pop quizzes, stuff like that. So those visuals help with training a lot.
When our company has leadership meetings, I think it sounds similar. We use a MindMeister. And it's a live feed where enter this code, go to this web address and enter this code, and it logs you in, and somebody you can do live polls and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. To your point, doing that in front of a live audience, it could very quickly get abused.
Yeah. You have to be smart about it, because with like the polls and surveys and stuff, usually it's just percentages. So 20% is a member company, 80% is excavators, things like that. Yeah. So I'm not really worried about Bob saying something. But if it's a test field, then I want to keep those comments and stuff outside unless it's around something specific. But yeah.
Right.
Some really cool tools.
So what are there specific topics that you talk about in your presentations, or what
Yeah.
is that typical audience, and what's the core message? I mean, is it all around safe excavation? Is there branches off of that? What do you do?
Yeah, so the big umbrella is going to be just utilization of 811. So that's understanding why 811 exists. Oki's been around since 1979, the history of the law, why it's around. Because when you think about it, why is there even a law? This should be common sense. Like, why is this a legal requirement? Well, it's because damages could happen if there wasn't a process in place. And so we talk about that process and how it's a communication tool. And like I said, the process may not be perfect, but we're striving towards getting better every year. And so what I do is I umbrella A11 process and how your role is in that, whether you're a member company needs to respond and go locate these lines in time. If you're doing public awareness, how you get that information out before an excavator's in your areas, all that stuff on the member side. On the excavator side, I'm talking about being safe, putting in the locate requests, understanding what those markings mean, the tolerance zone, all kinds of stuff, right? So I don't want to do a full presentation right now, but the big 811 process is overarching and that goes everywhere. We also have a classroom 811 certification that we have. It's 3 hours. I talk all things 811. And then there's a 25 question test that they can take on their phone or laptop and get certified. And that shows that they paid attention. It shows that they've got an 80% or better and they're good to go, right? And then I have recently started branching out, trying to get there's only so many ways you can talk about shovels, right? And so I have branched out to include things like the imposter syndrome. It still ties into safety culture because once you overcome this imposter syndrome, then you'll be able to be more vocal when you see something that's not safe. You'll be able to be okay with squeaking a little to let somebody else be safer, things like that. So imposter syndrome's a topic that I've taken off with. I'll be doing my sixth presentation over that this summer, if not again by the end of the year. So I'm kind of branching out, getting a little bit more on the professional development side, as long as it still ties into safety culture as well. Because I think, like I said, a lot of my excavators are going to come back year after year and hear the same stuff because digging doesn't change. But if I can help grow them in other avenues of their work, because safety culture, it's a beautiful word, but it's really hard to define. And so it's more of how each individual impacts that safety culture instead of just saying, we have one, you're a part of it. No, it starts from each individual, making it a collective, not the collective forcing an individual to be safe. So
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah,
like
and
that.
and talking about things like imposter syndrome is really interesting. You would think that it doesn't have anything to do in that type of environment, but you also have to think there's a lot of, bravado, I'd
Mhm.
say, maybe, and it's a very often, historically, it tends to be a very testosterone fueled, sometimes
Mhm.
ego-driven type of a world to work in, and so I think it's important to have those conversations and almost give people permission to speak up whenever they see something that is not right or makes them nervous, or know that somebody else has their back whenever
Right.
it's time to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Um,
One point I make with the imposter syndrome is who wants to go and tell your boss you almost got hurt? Like, does anybody want to go to your boss right now and go, hey, I messed up. I should have done this, but I took the shortcut and I almost got hurt. Because your mindset is, well, I didn't get hurt. I don't have to tell anybody. Because if you suffer through imposter syndrome, like I had multiple times, you want to go tell your boss that you made a mistake because then you'll be found out, right? And so by understanding imposter syndrome and trying to overcome that, then you can have communication with your leadership. You can, like you said, let that bravado die down and go, hey, we need to make sure nobody else is trying to do these shortcuts. We all need to know how lockout works. We all need to know this so that we can stay safe together. And it's going to start with me by me overcoming imposter syndrome and a champion of safety.
And the locates is really just one small part of that safety culture. The
Mm,
first, what comes to mind a lot is, excavation safety laws, trench depths, trench collapses, and that sort of thing. We met with a contractor the other day that he was telling us that they've only had, I think, one fatality in the 25 years or whatever, but it still haunts him. And it was a
yeah.
situation to where it was a Thursday afternoon and they needed to find where the existing gas line was because they needed to be able to make the tie-in. And the inspector or whoever was in charge of the job had already told them, don't worry about finding that today. We've got a lot of work to do. but the foreman or whoever it was going to be off the next day. And he's like, no, I need to find it now. And it was about 8 feet down, and they thought that they had located it. And he was just going to hop down there real quick just to uncover it with his foot just to make sure. And yeah, and he tamped on the top of the ground to see if he could hear that the gas main underneath, and that's all it took to collapse that trench. And it happens over many stories start with, all I got to do is do this real quick, or this one little thing, or it starts by minimizing the urgency of following the proper protocols.
Yeah. And that's difficult to illustrate, because if we all know what the right way to do something is, and then we all take shortcuts, then why did we learn the right way in the first place, right? And the reason that the right way exists, whatever it may be, whatever the right way is, the reason it exists is because somebody got hurt not doing it the right way. And yeah, you may get away with it 999 times. You did it the right way that 1000th time, you would have been safe. But instead, you took that same shortcut, you did that same thing that isn't the right way, and it caused some type of repercussion from it. So I always talk about the right way is paramount. There's a reason the right way exists.
When we have rules or laws in life that sometimes seem odd, or if you ever have to ask, why this is a stupid law, why do we have this law? If it seems like a stupid law, it's because it has to exist because somebody did something
right
that caused us to have to make a rule of things that should be well known or unspoken by everyone. Right. This is so much more of a serious issue. It really is there for our protection. And I'm guilty. I'm guilty of all of that as well. I have to check myself every once in a while and say, no, this is the right thing to do. I don't want to have to wait 2 days, but it's the right thing to do.
Exactly. Yeah. Right now, Oklahoma Corporation Commission is the enforcement agency for the Oklahoma Underground Facilities Damage Prevention Act, if you ever wanted the full law name. And so what is occurring right now is we have had over 30 citations of people who did not put in a locate request. So Oklahoma Corporation Commission goes out, they see a work site, they go, hey, I don't see any flags around here or paint. Do you have a valid locate request? They say no. And I go, why don't you? And they're like, we've never put one in before. And that is just wild to me, right? Because that's not even taking a shortcut. That's just a no to the process, right? And so why there's so many citations going out right now is the Oklahoma Corporation Commission got their enforcement about 2.5 years ago. And they were figuring out, hey, what does this mean? Like, yeah, we're the enforcers, but what does this look like? And just within the last year, they put together a damage prevention team that goes around and spot checks work sites and all this other stuff. And that crew that has never put in a locate request before has always gotten away because we've never had anybody doing these spot checks. So they're finding out about it for the first time that it's actually against the law not to have a locate request around these pipelines. And it is mind-blowing to me because we think it's so common sense, but we all know the phrase, common sense isn't so common. And then I think about the risks that they're taking. If they've never put in locate requests and they're literally around a pipeline, because that's why Oklahoma Corporation Commission is there, they've taken that risk how many times before? And we're lucky that, yeah, it's things that you got cited this time, but hopefully you'll make that change and use locate requests going forward. So.
In addition to that, maybe especially that, I'm amazed at the lack of public awareness of the 811 laws. I'm here in Fort Worth, Texas, and we just recently had one of the fiber overlay projects are big right now. They're coming in. There's federal funds available for fiber companies to go do overlays in existing neighborhoods. It's intended for rural, but they're also installing within existing subdivision. And I kind of became our public liaison for what do these flags mean? What does this paint in my yard? I mean, I'm just amazed because I live in the world, so I take it for granted.
Yeah.
But people didn't even understand things like utility easement. Why are they digging in my yard? Why are they doing this? Well, they're in the utility easement. I mean, I just happen to remember what mine was from seeing the plat. Right. No, they have the legal right to do what they're doing. They still have some safety responsibilities, and that's why they're calling in locates, and that's what the paint and flags for. And there was still some damage. Like there were still 2 or 3 times they hit a gas line.
Yeah, that's what we're learning. So with these new citations going out, I'm realizing that I'm talking to or training people who's now put in locate requests. So now they're willing to put in locate requests, but do they know that paint that's on the ground is not directly above that utility like 90% of the time? Do they know it's a 4-foot path that it could be within? Are they hand digging the way they should to go and discover the 3Ds? This is a phrase I hope it takes off. To discover the 3Ds, the depth, the direction, and the distance of those underground facilities in that area. Are they not using heavy equipment until the tolerance zone has been exposed and supported and protected, which in Oklahoma, it's a 2-foot area that you can't use heavy equipment. If we can get them to put in a call, are we still educating them to steps 2, 3, 4, 5 down the road? And that's our biggest hurdle, because I think of the public awareness. A lot of people have seen our gopher and our mouse and been to a basketball game or a baseball game where we've done public awareness, or our member companies do a great job where there's pipeline markers everywhere and USIC trucks with A11 on every tailgate there is, right? So there's a lot of, they know A11 exists, but do they know the process? And that's where we're trying to step that up, because we're grateful for every call that's made. And our agents do a good job of explaining the process between now and the lines getting marked. But if we started teaching them everything they need to know every phone call, I mean, it would be 30-minute phone calls. So there's unlimited stuff. So we put as much as we can with our website, our YouTube, our podcast, blah, 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 to get that next step.
Yeah, the public awareness is really just the first step that you have to then continue on of what to do with that. I think, was there a horse that won the Kentucky Derby and sponsored by
Yeah.
811 a couple years ago?
So that is one of the many ways. There's also a NASCAR race in Arizona called the 811.com race. I forgot the rest of it, but it's a long title for a race. So there's 811 out there. What we were talking, I got in a conversation with another state about our marketing budget and how this money goes and what's the ROI on your marketing. And it's a unique conversation, right? Because last year, for example, we did 1.2 million locate requests, right? For comparison, Texas did a little bit over 5 million. So I don't want to sound too cool, but
There's
Texas,
scale, though.
yeah,
There's
there is scale. There
population.
is scale. Yeah. But so we did 1.2 million tickets. Awesome. Out of the 1.2 million tickets, like 1 million of it is professional excavators. And that means they always put in a locate request because they've been in the system forever. They're updating their tickets. They're professionals. They're going to do it every single time. And then let's say a quarter of that is first time excavators, someone who just got their landscaping company together, who just now became a plumber, whoever that case may be. And so when we look at that, are we educating them enough, right, to get them to steps 2 through 5? So that's that. But then you go back to the marketing and you're like, well, we got that quarter to call in for the first time. That's outstanding. But would they have if they never saw a commercial? And then what about homeowners? A homeowner, I may decide to do an overhaul in my backyard this weekend, and then I will not call 811 again for a decade because I'm not a professional. So even though that homeowner saw that commercial this week during the Thunder game, for example, it'll hold on to them until 5 years from now when they're finally putting in that basketball goal or whatever the case may be. What an analogy, Thunder game to basketball goal. So anyway, so there's that, right? So marketing when it comes to a safety product or a safety service, I should say, if you're looking at ROI, you're looking at the wrong. We're not going to see an increase of widgets being sold. We weren't going, well, we need to do this. We had 1.2 million tickets last year. If we don't have 1.5 million this year, we need to, do something else marketing wise. It's not to scale like a typical ROI.
Well, I've never dug in my backyard, but until this fiber company came in, I didn't know that I had a 3-phase line that turns out of the transformer and goes down the side lot of the neighbor behind me. And I went and looked at my plat, and sure enough, there's a 7.5-foot easement that runs on the side that, I've never thought about it. Certainly wouldn't have thought to dig. And, and I'm looking at hiring a company to put in a French drain. So,
Right.
I mean, I've got to make sure that they're doing what they need to do there because it crosses right there.
Yeah, I am. I got an email sent to me about an organization doing a festival, and they were emailing me about putting up a tent. And they're like, just making sure this is you guys too, right? And we're like, yeah, because in Oklahoma, our excavation law is excavation is defined as any movement of earth.
Okay.
So that's it. Like whether it's a horse and a plow or if it's an excavator, if earth is being moved, you're excavating. And so I explained how driving stakes for a tent is moving earth and why it's necessary and all this other stuff. And by the time the conversation ended, not only was that festival excited about understanding the process a little bit better, We also got invited to go and exhibit at the so so it's unique when you go, "Oh, wait, I guess this was a public awareness. It wasn't even an education thing. Look at that. I had both hats on." So it's cool when those kind of things come together.
Well, cool. Yeah, I appreciate it. I don't wanna we could talk about the education side of it all day long.
Yeah.
What what do you think? I know you're really kinda going with the flow, and it sounds like what I really like is how you feel much more people focused
Mhm.
now. And I felt that in your story that I think that there are technical jobs that which is kind of what you were doing in GIS, but you can also have sales and software type related jobs that can also be very people focused,
Mm.
but not necessarily sales. How did you find, do you feel like you're in a happy median right now of you're still very people focused, customer facing, and what is your comfort level with not necessarily public speaking, but
Yeah.
when you first started, were you nervous about talking to more people? I mean, it kind of touches on that imposter syndrome, but I want to look at how do people direct their careers to where I want to talk to people, I don't want to talk to the general public, or I just want to do my thing.
Great question. So, luckily for me, and I say lucky, maybe unlucky, it's not like I'm rich off of it. I also do stand-up comedy. So, I've been doing public speaking for decades, right? Obviously, I'm not on tour, so I just have a local thing. I do a lot of MC events and stuff like that. But I've always been comfortable with the mic in my hand. That's not the issue. The issue for me is when I started getting in front of these excavators who know so much more about the subject than I do, right? If I'm telling a joke, I wrote the joke. Like there's no like, man, that person's gonna know that this could have been done better, said better, or whatever, right? But when it's coming to training, I would say the first 3 years of me stepping into the role, I was very law heavy. I wanted to know everything in the law, like the definition of excavation and how long the tickets are good for, and all these responsibilities of all parties and all this other stuff. So I dove into the legalese because I wasn't going to let somebody know more about A11 than me because I'm the one up in front of them. But I did everything I can on the A11 side without worrying about the excavation side because the excavators, they're professionals. There's somebody else who should have hired them and trained them to do their job. I'm just trying to make sure they understand the A11 process. So the first 3 years was I wanted to be right. And that was huge to me. Like if someone questioned me, I'm like, nope, this is why. And I was very black and white and we just talked it out. And I just wanted to be right. 3 years ago, it was about when that shift happened. That's when I realized being right isn't always approachable. And when I go, hey, I know how the law says this should be done, and I know what these best practices are, but ultimately, I care more about you coming back to work tomorrow than you understanding the legalese of the law. Because if you're doing everything you can to stay safe, you're taking care of your crew, your teammates, the damage prevention thing is going to take care of itself. Because if you're doing everything it takes to stay safe, then you're not going to have an excavator within 2 feet of an underground line. You're not going to not call in a locate request because if you don't call in a locate request, how are you going to get home today? Right. And so that perspective changed to where do I still know the law in and out? But I don't want to be right anymore. I want to be caring. I want to show them that this communication hub is for their safety, not being right or wrong anymore. And that has made, I think, my trainings a lot more tolerable. I'm not coming from a place where I'm on a soapbox telling them that what they've been doing is wrong. I'm coming from a place, is this the safest way to do this? Yes or no? And if it's not the safest, let's go there. Because one of my training partners, he goes, can I make this situation safer? Ask yourself that. The answer is going to be yes. Make it safer, then ask again, and then make it safer, and then ask again. And it'll be eventually where you cannot make it any safer. And then you can have confidence to do the right thing. So that's kind of where that shift has taken. I was comfortable speaking. I just wanted to be right. And then I decided being right isn't always the best way to be approachable.
I think being an outsider from the industry has given you an advantage because I think it brings a distinct perspective. There's something about coming in wide-eyed and not knowing that when you ask questions, they're genuine questions because you don't know and you're eager to learn.
Right.
It's like you said, I think you said that you mentioned that it gave you a lot of flexibility in your career to be able to ask hard questions that maybe others hadn't asked before, were afraid to ask, or maybe they just hadn't, no one thought of it before.
It's funny because I'm in new situations all the time. I got a phone call from a natural gas company saying, "Hey, there was a line hit a couple blocks away from your office. Do you want to come out and say hi and see what this process is?" I was like, "Heck yeah, I'm on my way." So I jumped in the Okimobile, right? So we jumped in. I go a couple blocks down and I see natural gas just blowing in the air, trees just flapping, and there's an excavator like looking just totally mad, like, because he hit this line, he's aware of it, and he's standing there, and I see paint and flies, I see that things were done, I just don't know where the problem was. So I talked to the, natural gas representative, and he told me that there is a valid locate request, this is what happened, and kinda broke down what they did, and unfortunately, the gas company had an abandoned line and an active line in the same area. So there was one marking, and so as the excavator's looking for it, they found the abandoned line, and then they dug over and they found the live line the old-fashioned way, right? And so I had a really good conversation with that excavator. He's like, "I called in, I did what I was supposed to do. I spot checked, I found it, and all this other stuff." And technically, he should have not had that heavy equipment even within that area because even though he found the abandoned line, he didn't expose and protect it 2 feet either way and all this other stuff. So there's some technicalities where there was a mistake made, but the locator's mistake also complicated things, right? But having that all parties involved and saying, "Okay, this is what we're gonna do from here," I got to ask questions that I've never been part of a damage investigation. That's not a role that I have, and so it was just a eye-opening to be able to ask the natural gas companies, like, "What do you do from here? What is your insurance like? How are you getting recouped for the cost of the lost gas?" And all this other stuff, and then I talked to the excavator and I go, "Are you taking photos? What are you doing on your side to show that it was their mistake? How can I help you to make sure that you're ready for this insurance claim?" And all that sort of stuff. And then I walk away going, I'm team natural gas company because technically that's where my paycheck comes from. And I'm also team excavator because I just want him to be safe and do his job. And it was a great learning experience. And that's exactly what you're saying. Like when you're out of the industry and you're just outside looking in, you can just show up and start asking questions and nobody's going to be mad at you. Like I come from a place of ignorance. I just want to help everybody out. Where can I start? And it was great.
Yeah, that's great. Well, where do you see, just kind of as we start to wrap up a little bit, what do you see as the future? I know you're very much in a place of living in the present and going with the flow, but I would imagine you've also kind of got a vision of where you would like, whether it's your speaking or the public awareness aspect or the different things that you're doing. Where do you see that going in the next 5, 10 years with your
Yeah.
career?
Within this 3 to 5, I love OK11. I plan on being here. I hope to retire. There's great opportunities in front of me. But in addition to my role here, I have opened up the opportunity to go and speak at different conferences, help that out as well. And so I've been given the blessing from my executive director and leadership that in addition to my role here, if there's opportunities for a damage prevention conference or industry conference or anybody in safety culture wants to reach out to me and if I can put it in my calendar, I'd be happy to go and help out. So that's kind of where I am next 3 to 5 years. Outside of that, unless something entrepreneurial really takes off for me, I just don't see me leaving OK1 and seeing everything I can accomplish here.
With the support that you got, it's absolutely amazing, the way that they've kind of empowered you to be able to find what you enjoy there, but you're also carrying the message, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so that's what's really great about it.
I often joke, I don't wear a hard hat, but I'm always branded, right? So understanding that every time I talk, every time I post something on social media or something like that, I'm not just MG, this funny guy who is enjoying his life. I'm also representing a safety culture, safety organization, and understanding that duality, if you will, of who I am gives me the confidence to present myself and grow my brand as an individual and also as part of the company.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, I'll tell you what would you say? I'll leave you with the last words of anything that you've wanted to say, message you would want to get out, whether it's the industry, young professionals, and also tell us where people can find you and reach out.
Yeah, definitely. So slightly before 3 years ago, I was asked to go up to Tulsa to do a safety presentation. And the construction company safety director reached out to me. He was like, "Hey, I really want you to really hammer home the tolerance zone and how important it is not to use heavy equipment around underground facilities until it's exposed, supported, and protected, all those things that I mentioned earlier." And I was like, okay, yeah. And this was my being right days. So I'm like, oh, you want me to come out there and just talk about the law and tell everybody what they did wrong? Yeah, I can't wait. And so I ran up to Tulsa and went to 7 a.m. safety meeting, and Tulsa's 2 hours away. So I was already mad at my decision making. But I got there anyway. And safety director comes up to me and he's like, hey, just so you know, a lot of our employees are under 25 years old. The no frontal lobe thing is a thing and their attention span's low. I was like, that's cool because I'm not quite sure about my frontal lobe or my attention span either. So I could probably relate. And so I get up there and I'm going through the motions. I'm going through my presentation and I was still relatively green. And this was also a group that I'd never been in front of before. And I was a little intimidated. There was almost 100 people in this warehouse, right? And so I clicked a slide and it says, be safe. And I could not come up with why I put that slide there. There was no transition. It was just weird, right? And I didn't want them to know because of my imposter syndrome that I made a mistake. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to riff real quick and make up something. So I was like, hey, by the way, guys, we've been talking about the law a lot. We've been talking about the legalese of it. And I'm telling you like what's right and wrong and how things should be done. But ultimately, I want you to be safe. And what that means is this. I have a house and I obviously work from home sometimes. So I want to be able to work from home. I want to be able to watch the football game. I want to be able to take showers. All of those rely on something underground, right? So please don't mess up my services. Also, there's vulnerable in our community and I probably should put them first, but I didn't. But are vulnerable in our community. They need to be able to survive the hot summers and the cold winters and be able to call 911 and such. So let's worry about the vulnerable in our. And then, like I said earlier, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that these facility operators who receive the locate request, they are part of our nonprofit organization. And as our members, they pay for every locate request they receive. And so our budget involves that and then includes my salary. So let's not mess up our member company's bottom line. So those three reasons are all solid reasons not to be risky out there. But ultimately, the reason that we do this is for your safety, for you to be able to go home today and then come back tomorrow, for you to be able to provide for your family, for your community, things of that nature. It was weird. It got really, really awkwardly. So I was like, something's going on. And I just, that slide, it was no transition. It was weird. It was like I punched everybody. Finish up, wrapped up everything with the 5 steps of safe digging, contact us, wait for your lines to be located, spot check, hand dig to find the facilities, and then dig safely. And so we talked about that for a little bit, wrapped it all up. Safety director comes up to me and he goes, hey, MG, do you have a second to talk to me? And I was like, yeah, of course. Because Brad, as you do more and more public speaking, if someone asks you to stick around, I'll always say yes, because you're about to get free food. And so I was like, yeah, I can stick around. And safety director goes, before we talk, I just need to get these 5 guys. And I was like, okay, are they in trouble? And he goes, no, they're not in trouble. So I'm just breaking down my laptop and pulling my flash drive out. And I hear the safety director go, hey guys, I hope you were paying attention to MG, especially when we talked about the tolerance zone. Crucial that you realize how important it is not to use heavy equipment within 2 feet of underground facilities. There is not a good reason that we lost a coworker a couple months ago. So when he said those words out loud, it caught me off guard. I'm still new, relatively. I'm still just trying to be right. The idea that somebody had a consequence, right? I'm supposed to be there before the consequences. I'm supposed to make sure they don't do these wrong things, but I wasn't there before. I was there in response to it. And it kind of hit me, and because I didn't ask, hey, did someone do something so stupid that they got fired on the spot? I didn't ask, hey, did someone get injured and now they just can't do their job anymore? And I also didn't ask if it's that other thing, right? Because I realized in that moment, if I had to validate why I'm there, then the passion for safety culture isn't the reason I'm there. That's a passion of the headlines. And I don't need that. I want to make sure that people just are doing their job, staying safe and coming back. And that was the beginning of, this isn't about me anymore. It's about those who are listening to these training messages. And I stopped worrying about being right. I really did. And so that was huge to me. So those who are in the industry, those who are in damage prevention, we are going to get caught up in numbers. We're going to look at how many misses there were, how many line strikes there were per 1,000 locate requests. We're going to see how many fatalities there were in trench collapses over the last year. We're going to worry about numbers. But if you can get past the numbers and realize those are human beings, those are people in our communities, everybody I speak to when I have this logo on is in the state of Oklahoma. They are literally in my home state. And I have a chance to influence them and hopefully keep them safe. And if you that are in the damage prevention industry or just safety in general, get past the numbers and care about the humans, and your whole perspective and trajectory will change, and you'll get more enjoyment if you care more about people than you do numbers. I can promise you that.
Great way to end it. Appreciate that story, because that definitely can leave an impact for sure, especially when you knew that what you were stepping into even after the fact, and the impact that it could have had long term. Where's the best place for people to find you?
Oh yeah. So professionally, I have a really easy email address. It's the word education at oka11.org. My last name is a little different. It's Govia, which is Govia. You can look me up on LinkedIn. I'll also reach out to Brad and make sure that we have some contact information in the podcast description as well. But look me up on LinkedIn. Feel free to follow and connect with me there. And then if you have any direct email question, just the word education at oka11.org.
Awesome. And the Digging Deep podcast,
Yeah,
among
exactly.
others.
Yeah, you're good. Digging Deep does have its own page on LinkedIn. So you can also look for the page for podcast announcements and episode releases. But Digging Deep and OK11 podcasts found anywhere podcasts are distributed. And if you don't know the secret about YouTube, if you do youtube.com/the @ symbol OK11, you'll find our channel. So it's just at OK11 through the .com, and you'll be able to find us on as a YouTube channel as well.
Awesome. Thank you, MG. Really appreciate talking to me today.
Oh, Brett, I'm looking forward to hearing the final product, and hopefully I can join up with you again some other time. I'm a big fan of you and what you're doing with your podcast. So thanks for the invite.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Talk later.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Building Blocks podcast. If you found anything beneficial from today, I would appreciate you reaching out and letting me know on LinkedIn. I'm always looking for ways to add value to the listeners and interviewing leaders in our industry. If you found this helpful, I would appreciate if you leave us a review and reach out to me on LinkedIn and give me some feedback. In addition, if you know someone that would be good for an interview, please let me know and I'd be happy to connect with them. You can find myself and any of the other guests on LinkedIn, where we continue the conversations about leadership, careers, growth, and development.